Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about basically the state of the economy for average Main Street Americans like you and I. Obviously, things have gotten bad, and I think we're being gaslit in the media by just how bad it is. You can see evidence of this from the recent scandal at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and how they've had to make revisions to the job numbers. The New York Times posted an article maybe like a week ago now where New York City has added less than 1,000 jobs so far this year, which is like 30-fold less than in previous years for the comparable time frame. So, like, the economy's not adding new jobs, and the jobs numbers that we've been given have been false. And then obviously, like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at your own expenses, and you can see things have just gone through the roof. So I came across this person. Someone had shared her channel with me, so I came across her and I found this video on her site, and I wanted to go through it with you because she highlights some of the struggles just everyone else is experiencing right now. And I think there's a lot of content on social media like this, and I've contributed to this too, just talking about all the doom and gloom. And I want to talk about the doom and gloom. I want to provide context for what's happening from a historical perspective, and then hopefully give some insights into how I'm approaching it. This is kind of like my whole raison d'etre, if you will, of creating content online, writing on Substack, making videos like this, is because I do think we are in a deeply transformative period right now. I don't think this is a unique experience. I think our ancestors have experienced this multiple times throughout history, and now it's our turn. Unfortunately, we're just not prepared for it for myriad different reasons. And I think right now, the goal for most of us is just to kind of get through it. For up until, recently, I think a lot of folks, including myself, we've been told build a career, save for retirement, save up to buy a house, do this, do that, and all these like lofty goals. And I don't think that you shouldn't necessarily stop aspiring to those things, but I do think there needs to be a level of pragmatism and a dose of reality of what is and what the status quo is at this very moment and what you have to work, like the operating environment you have to work in versus what you think ought to be. Because I think there's a fundamental misalignment between the two. And once you accept what is, it makes it easier for you mentally and emotionally and spiritually to work towards the things you want. It's not nihilistic and giving up. It's just being pragmatic that we have entered a period of economic transformation. Things are about to get very heated in this country, politically, socially, culturally. I think they already are. And I think we need to just come up with a different playbook than what we've been given and find ways to be adaptive and flexible to the changes that are happening, not try to swim against the current, not try to fight them. But, the goal is to survive and then to thrive on the other side. And so I think there's things we can do collectively and individually to kind of reorient our minds around this and develop strategies to, get through this. But like I said, I think we need a dose of reality, and we need to understand what is rather than what ought to be. So without further ado, let's dive into this video.
Come around, you don't see people really sharing the truth of how they feel, the struggles that they're really going through, and people are becoming more and more vocal about that. In fact, it's almost a new trend to actually share how you really are feeling, how you really are struggling, especially here in America.
Hey, what's up, America? I'm going to be real with you here because I see no future for people in America. After seeing the high cost of homes nationwide, the high cost of gas, the high cost of food, the high cost of rent, cars, rental cars, used cars, insurance, healthcare, taxes, and every other thing, how is anybody in this country supposed to prosper that's not already wealthy? Could someone tell me that? The pulling yourself up by your bootstraps argument is and over. It doesn't work now. You have average home prices of $512,000. Grocery prices are almost 100% more since 4 years ago.
Okay, just want to interject here with a different perspective. Yes, the concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps might not necessarily be the best advice right now, but I do think people have choices and they have options, and people aren't changing or making changes. They're not evaluating their options. So for example, he just said, home prices are $512,000. I don't know where he lives. Last I saw, the average was in the, like, I think 440,000. Regardless, home prices are through the roof. I get that. I think we all know that. However, I've said this in other videos and I will continue to harp on this. That is not the case everywhere. Over the past, 3 or 4 decades, as a result of deindustrialization, there has been net out migration in a lot of cities across the country. Places like Detroit, places like Cleveland, small towns and cities in Wisconsin and in Indiana, Pennsylvania, New York, along the East Coast, old industrial towns. There's been a net out migration. Part of that obviously is due to the loss of jobs. Yes. So those places aren't really desirable right now because there aren't jobs other than working at Walmart or working, at a distribution warehouse, for example. But if you currently live in a city, say you live in Miami, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and you have the ability to work remotely, you can relocate and geo arbitrage the cost of housing. So yeah, do you want to live in Cleveland? No, probably not. Do you want to live in Detroit? No, probably not. Is that an option? Yes, it is for some people. Not everyone, but for some people it is. So I think it's important to keep that in mind, that there are options. Same with groceries, okay? We eat a really clean diet, more or less. I make everything from scratch. Yeah, we have a sweet tooth and I bake a lot of, cookies and things like that. But for the most part, we have a really clean diet. I made, Greek salad, homemade falafels, and homemade pita for dinner this past week, right? So I do all my own cooking, everything from scratch. When I go to the grocery store, my food is minimally packaged. The only thing that's really packaged that I'm buying is dairy, or I'll buy, canned tomatoes, for example, just because they're convenient. Everything else is produce. And so, one of the things I've done to cut down on costs is I've been buying more economical produce. So things like cabbage. I've been cooking a lot of cabbage, in part because it's low carb and it fits in the diet I'm following right now. But it's also significantly cheaper. So yes, groceries have gone up substantially. But if you're still buying manufactured ultra processed foods, that's also kind of on you. If you're still, people talk about Chipotle, for example. Chipotle, I remember, what was it? Like a decade ago, I could get a vegetarian Chipotle burrito for like $7, $8. And now, there's people who are talking about paying, $15, $20 for burritos. Okay, you can make your own burritos. It's really not that hard. If you get an Instant Pot, you can make rice so simply. You can make beans. Like, I use it all the time. We do tacos every single Tuesday, and it's really easy to make a nice spread. I make homemade tortillas. It's not that hard. So yes, I understand there's stress and there's frustration, but if you have the option to migrate to a lower cost of living area, or you have the option of eating different food, learning how to cook, and, eating from home and eating cleaner and not eating packaged food, those options are available to you. I know, obviously there are circumstances where, okay, you work a 12-hour shift, you're a nurse at a hospital, and like you can't necessarily go out all the, cook everything, or okay, maybe you have a family member who's sick and you need to stay in your hometown and you live in a really, you grew up in a really expensive area. I get that. That's not for everyone. But it's just, this is what is. There are cheaper options at the grocery store. There are cheaper housing options. Those are available to you, and you can choose whether or not to take those.
Same with rent, same with mortgages, same with used cars, same with new cars. Taxes are slightly lower, and I do mean slightly. Wages are slightly up, but no way in hell will that meet the requirements. I just saw a story about a nurse with a $75,000 salary a year and an 808 credit score denied for getting a home. Zero student loan debt too. So debtless, making 75 grand a year with an over 800 credit score, not good enough for a house. So what are we doing here? What's the end goal? Starvation? Death? What's going on here?
I mean, he's not wrong on this part. So I've been reading this book called Secular Cycles by Peter Turchin. This is a super nerdy academic book, but basically makes the argument. It looks at demographics and population and the economy, and it makes the argument that historically civilization has operated more cyclically. So we like to think of time as this linear thing that we're progressing through, when in reality history literally does repeat itself. And so there are different points in time in the cycle, and part of this is kind of dissecting Thomas Malthus's argument, where at some point the population would reach an unsustainable level, because population would grow exponentially, while at the time in 19th century Europe, it was still largely an agrarian economy, even though, had started industrializing. It wasn't fully industrialized yet. So it was still very much an agrarian economy. And at some point, the rising population level would outstrip the ability of the land to be able to produce enough food to sustain those people. So it would naturally lead, basically, nature would take its course, and through wars, pestilence, and famine, the population would go from being too high to back to a sustainable level. So this book kind of looks at that analysis through what they call a secular cycle. And so part of that is starvation. Throughout history, there were periods of hardship for peasants. And a lot of that had to do with some of the dynamics we're experiencing now. So in the past, you had an aristocracy, and you had a state government, which was usually a monarchy, and then you had the peasantry. Presently, we have us average Main Street American workers. You have elite corporations, big companies, elite politicians, and then you also have the state. And every one of those groups has their own interests, but throughout history, the peasants have always been on the losing end of this, and it is how it is. I don't know that there's anything that we can necessarily do to change that. And typically during these cycles, a lot of conflict has arisen when there's been an overabundance of people in the elite strata of society. So, and this makes sense, right? If you have too many elite people vying for too few, say, spots in parliament, or, in Europe, and this is a unique feature of Europe that we don't really understand here in the United States, but for to be in the aristocracy in Europe, you had to be a landowner. And so there was only so many parcels of land that people could own, right? Like land is a finite resource. And so because there were only so many parcels of land that could be owned, and noble land was usually passed down from generation to generation, upward mobility was really difficult. So there were parts of the elite strata that weren't necessarily nobility, and they didn't have the noble titles, but they weren't peasants either. They were probably the equivalent of the middle class. So that could have been, during feudal Europe, if you had fought, say, in the Crusades, you might have returned and gotten a parcel of land within your, like your lord's manor, for example. And so you might have received an award for valor during the Crusades, and then you would have maintained that. In the 19th century in Russia, the elite class was the intelligentsia. They were nobles who were kind of poor. They were on the poor end of the spectrum. There wasn't land for them, and there weren't positions for them in the government administration. So they all went to the universities, and then they became educated, but also landless and also jobless. So there's different types of elites, and there's different levels within the elite strata, but throughout history it's always been a conflict within the elites. At least this is what this book is arguing. It's been a conflict between the elites vying for power, and vying for status, vying for stability, vying for mobility that they didn't previously have. For the peasants, they just wanted to survive. That is the goal for most peasants. Get through, the next harvest, the next year, just get through life. And then obviously the state was in charge of, orchestrating and operating things, making, providing safety and that kind of thing, especially during, periods where there's a lot of conflict and war. So yeah, is the goal starvation? I don't know that they directly want to starve us. I think the elites are vying for power, and one of the byproducts of that could be starvation and greater hardship for the peasantry, which is effectively what we are. And we don't acknowledge it as such in the United States, but you and I are peasants, and the sooner you can accept that you are never going to become one of them, I think the better off you will be, and the more at peace you will be. But yeah, the goal is to extract as many resources from us, the peasantry, as possible, because that's how it's always been. Okay. Um, and so I think people think we're living in this like unique moment in time, and it's, special, and this, oh, these, companies are doing these evil things to us, and this has never happened before. This has always happened throughout history, right? Whether it's taxes, whether it's land seizures, that happened too. There were some peasants who were independent landowners, and they had their land snatched up right from underneath them. You saw this during, the early Soviet years in the Soviet era. There was forced, land collectivization. So yeah, like throughout history, peasants have owned things, or they've worked, or they've had, ability to produce their own food, and then over time, that's degraded. Wages have gone down. Cost of living has risen. There's been wars and pestilence and famine and all these things that people have had to deal with. So we're not special and unique. And this is why I think people need to understand, or at least need to come to terms with what is versus what ought to be. I think we have a myth of what we think our lives should be. But based on history, we're just repeating a cycle that our ancestors repeated. And there is hardship. That's part of life. And so the more adaptive you are to that hardship, and the more you anticipate it and create flexibility for yourself, the better off you'll be for it.
No matter what you do, no matter how you spend the finances, the middle class and the poor have no upward mobility. There is no hope now. None. No hope. None. Zero. The next 2 or 3 generations are because you allowed so much greed. Younger generations will never have shit because of your greed. I've already broken my back trying to make ends meet working for the last 30 years. I already know I'm not going to get anything from the rich. I don't give a but the younger generations, if you keep stealing and being greedy, they're going to all be homeless. And then what do you have? Ruling over a bunch of homeless people? You.
Trigger warning, I'm gonna crash out right now, and this is gonna be a long video, but I feel like you could relate to this, so here we go. It's great living in America, unless you're a fucking American. If you're a bank though, you are thriving, while the rest of us are just trying to survive. I just came across a video saying that banks are at an all-time high. Like, their expectations have blown through the roof of what their profit margins were gonna be. You wanna know why? They are thriving because America is starving to live. At least 95% of Americans right now are literally surviving off credit cards, off loans in general.
So this is by design. This is not an accident. This should not come as a surprise. Historically, that this has always been the case where, especially, again, I'm looking at this from using this book as a lens and a perspective to analyze this. But throughout history, in the pre-industrial period, people needed a certain amount of land to produce food on. And if that parcel of land was too small, or, they didn't have access to it, or if taxes went up, so the amount of food the amount of their produce that they had to surrender to a noble lord or to the government, if they didn't have enough to meet their needs, then they did indeed starve. So this idea of not having enough to meet your needs is quite normal for the peasantry. It's not unique. So obviously things have changed, right? We're not producing our own food anymore. We're going to a job to earn a wage, and then we're taking that wage and we're going to buy groceries. But unfortunately, for, again, a lot of reasons, I talked about this in another video, but with productivity gains starting in the 70s and onward, they decoupled from wages. There's a reason for that. And so people have not been benefiting from essentially the products of their labor. And then throughout this time as well, the government, as the printing press, it has that ability to print money, thanks to, going off the gold standard. We've been basically debasing our currency for the past few decades. Well, I mean, since the Federal Reserve was created, honestly. But our currency, like a dollar, isn't actually worth a dollar. Okay. And so I don't think a lot of people understand this. Like, we have been in a problematic state for a while. And again, this is normal. During the Roman period, they frequently debased their currency. They would, they would shave off gold or shave off silver and the coinage. So the coin was supposed to be worth one unit. But once you shaved off some, is actually less than that. So if you had 1 unit of gold, it was really only 0.95 units of gold. So again, inflation isn't new, debasement of currency isn't new. All of this isn't new. But this is why you have to understand what is. We are supposed to be paying for things with loans and credit cards, because that our system, we have been living in a while, but we live in a post-capitalist economy. This is not the capitalism of Adam Smith's time. Okay, we do live in a post-capitalist society. You can call it cronyism. There's all sorts of different terms for it, but we live in a post-capitalist society, and we have been. And so our economy is highly leveraged and highly financialized. So the way people make money, the way the elites, the bankers, the way they make money is by issuing loans to you and me, to get us to trade our time for a wage that is consistently depreciating in value. And the goal is to create longevity and the amount of time we need to repay that loan. So it could be taking out a lot of debt, a high interest rate, all that kind of stuff. But the goal isn't to give us, mobility, There's just like this illusion that we're supposed to be benefiting from banks. Like, have you ever stopped to think, why is your bank, whether it's Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, why is your bank in a commercial shopping plaza next to the grocery store, next to Target, next to, your favorite Chinese takeout spot? Have you ever stopped to wonder why a bank is there in a retail center that is filled with other stores where you're supposed to spend money? That's by design. You're not supposed to save money with banks. You're supposed to spend money with banks. Like, you and I, at the peasant level, we're dealing with different types of bank products and banking infrastructure and banking services than the elites are. Okay? There's an entirely different financial system for them. There's a different financial system for countries. Like, there's a different financial system for companies. Like, we live in these different types of financial systems. So the one that you and I have been put into is a debt-induced one where you and I are supposed to spend more than we earn. Okay, our attentions have been hijacked. They have been manipulated. There's been decades of this has been going on. This isn't new. Advertising and marketing and all this kind of stuff. It's a science. They are trying to harvest as much money from you and I as possible. And because we're not making, there's not enough cash exchanging hands, we have been sold on this false lie of, credit is the solution. There's all these incentives to get us to sign up for credit. I was a personal finance writer for years, and you should stop following all personal finance people to begin with. That's my first piece of advice. But more importantly, if you didn't notice this, you'll notice this after I say this. Most of these personal finance people you follow on TikTok and YouTube and you read their blogs, they're in the business of selling credit cards. Just go to their website. They'll have all these roundups of the best travel credit cards or the best credit cards for this airline or this hotel. Like, all of these perks you get off credit cards, they're just marketing ploys to get you to take more, go into debt. And they do this by design because they know you will spend more than you can afford to pay back in order to get, the free travel miles to take a vacation somewhere. So all of this is by design, and there's an entire marketing and advertising ecosystem that creates psychological messaging to tell you all of this and reinforce all of this, that this is normal and that this is fine and that you should deserve a vacation. You should deserve to go do this and eat at this restaurant. And like I said, we have to rebaseline. We have to get back to what is, not what ought to be. But you have to, part of that is accepting debt is the norm. Not being in debt is the exception. Okay, so once you accept that, again, you see choices. I get it's hard. I struggle with it too. I've had to buy groceries on credit as well. I understand the pain. But that's when you have to make different choices. You have to say, okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to spend money here. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to buy, cabbage and learn to cook instead of buying these, processed foods at the grocery store. And you have to be willing to make those changes to beat the system. That's the only way you're going to be able to beat it.
And banks are eating that shit up over the high interest rates. We're fighting for our lives over here. You want to know what the American dream is like? Let me tell you. Every day I wake up hoping today is the last day on earth. I'm tired of it here. The American household on average is $80,000 in debt. And that's just credit cards and like auto loans maybe even some student loans thrown in there, but that's not even including your mortgage. That's just credit card debt. And right now, banks are eating that interest rate up while we're all surviving. You mean to tell me that the average American goes to their mind-sucking job, works 8 to 12 hours to have everything deducted, have nothing left to live on, and we're forced to put food on the table by using credit cards?
Yes, this is all by design. It's an illusion. Like, there's an illusion that working the 9 to 5 and being in the rat race is the key to, upward social mobility, is the key to wealth. And it's not. It's the key to keeping you stuck where you're at. Like, why do you think they convinced all of us to go to college and take out loans to do it? It wasn't so we could get jobs. Why would the elites, like I said before, this is all about elite competition, okay? So why would elites, intelligentsia, people who already have college degrees, want more people to compete with for the same or fewer number of jobs? The goal wasn't for you and I to get jobs. It was for you and I to become assets on a banker's balance sheet. So in the case of, student loans, federal student loans for the government, you and I now pay interest, and we contribute to the government's funding. So it's student loans are basically another tax. They're a hidden tax. If your loans are federally funded and you are paying even though you're paying a servicer, so I pay Nelnet, even though I'm paying Nelnet every month, my money isn't going to Nelnet. It's being passed through to the Department of Education, right? So the government, issued these loans to me, knowing full well there weren't jobs available for me, and knowing full well that there was no intent for me to get the good jobs. The goal was to get me to continue making payments and pay, interest and make it difficult to repay, because then you have a guaranteed source of income. That's why debt is so valuable on the balance sheets of lenders, because when you tie it especially to a credit score, you penalize people if they don't pay. So you get people to pay, you get people to surrender 40 plus hours of their week going to soul-sucking jobs they hate to keep paying these loans, because they know that their ability to buy a house in the future or get a car or rent an apartment is incumbent on keeping a good credit score. Okay, so the system is all by design. Yes, we're all doing this. We've all been duped. It's an illusion. Again, if you just wake up and realize it, and like the sooner you do that, and realize what is not what you think should be, the easier this is to process and handle.
Okay. Picture this, right? You go to college. You get yourself in hundreds of thousands of student loan debt. You are one of the 5% of college graduates to get your job in the field you got your degree in, right? You get everything garnished from your wages because the increase on living and everything around you has gone up, but your pay has stayed the same. But then you also get taxes taken out. We get taxed just to breathe, people. We get taxed on owning shit. We get taxed on working. We get taxed on just living.
This has always been the case. This isn't new.
Then you got health insurance. That's a joke and a whole video within itself. But basically, the average American pays anywhere between $300 and $1,000 a month for health insurance. Basically, you're paying just to say, I have health insurance. But then when you go to use health insurance, you have co-pays and deductibles, and they don't cover nothing until you've met your deductible. What do you mean? Why am I paying you $1,000 a month to have health insurance when I'm still paying more just to use it?
Okay, I also think health insurance is a total scam. I, caveat, thankfully don't have any like chronic issues I have to deal with. So I think that's a blessing and a bias on my end. But I do think health insurance is a complete scam. There's something I've been wanting to study more, and I just haven't had time to study it yet. But I really want to look deeper into how the Amish operate within the United States and the current state of our healthcare system. Because the Amish, to my understanding, do not have health insurance. So you have a group of people that has figured out how to operate outside of the health system, where I think they still do use, they still benefit from modern healthcare, right? Like they'll still get cancer treatments and emergency care and things like that. But for the most part, they have figured out how to operate and pay for those things outside of the healthcare or health insurance system. So I think there's a lesson to be learned there. Again, I'm not an expert on this, but I will say, was it 94% of Americans have metabolic dysfunction. So you have issues like diabetes, you have, heart disease, you have chronic issues that are related to diet and exercise, not necessarily health. So again, it is what is. the health insurance system sucks. Like, you're going to pay a lot of money and get no benefit from it. So you have to start thinking, okay, how can I operate outside of this? Like I said, the Amish is a case study. I think that's worth diving into. There's, I think, going to be a growing movement of people seeking sovereign patient status. So, you do things and you pay for things out of pocket. That's kind of what I've done. Anytime I need something, I will, ask for the rate. I will call and compare it, and I can tell you there's different rates depending on what you need done. So I had something done in June, and one medical center quoted me $150 for it. Another one quoted me $350. So I think we need to start taking ownership of our healthcare, ownership of our health data. You can do that now. There's all sorts of apps and tools, and you can go get, Quest Diagnostics, for example, like sells a la carte tests you can do. So, maybe we need to take some ownership over our own health, ownership over, diet and exercise, what we put in our mouths, how we move our bodies, ownership of our own information, and stop just surrendering to the perceived, authority of health insurance. It's a huge problem, and the more we, allow them to take advantage of us, the worse off we're gonna be.
I digress. Then you have everything like retirement, 401 taken out. Okay, great. You're going to work 30 to 40 years of your prime so that when you get to retirement age, we're going to give you monthly stipends back just so you can afford to live without a job. Meanwhile, like 80% of senior citizens that are retired now are working at Lowe's at the age of 87 because they can't survive just on their retirement. That's just a prime example. We're all struggling to keep our heads above water because we don't earn enough money. After everything gets taken out, we are now forced to pay super high interest rates on everything we own. Even stuff that's paid off, we're still paying interest on. How does that make any sense? But you're sitting there, the American family, the average American family is no longer middle class. You're either poor or rich. The rich is making money off the poor because the poor can't afford to have two jobs, full-time jobs, and still be able to take care of their families and have enough money at the end of the day to put food on the table. Hence why we are forced to live on credit card debt.
Okay, so the rich have always extracted resources and wealth from the poor. Again, this is not new. If you kind of look at the traditional understanding of how prices are set and Adam Smith's interpretation of it, there's three inputs. So you have profit, you have wages, and you have rent. And again, I think rent is hard for Americans to understand because we didn't grow up in a landed aristocratic society. But in Europe, Adam Smith was from Scotland, so the British sense. If you wanted to be a farmer, you would have to pay rent to the person who owned the land. So you would have to pay money to the elite person for the privilege of using their land. And then if you farmed it yourself, you got to keep the difference. Or if you hired help, you would have to pay wages to the help. And then the delta between the two is your profit, right? And so throughout history, the elite have always been rent extractors, and rent has always been the more stable of those three variables. And that's why you saw Marxism crop up in the late 19th century, because the only kind of levers that you could pull were wages and profit. So if capitalists wanted to earn more profit, the way they did that was to lower wages, okay? And there's different, mechanisms for that. You don't just necessarily have to pay people less. You can convince them to take a salary, for example, and work 50 hours a week or 60 hours a week, or maybe, I don't know, check their email on the weekends, or, give them a work phone so they're always on call. There's all sorts of hidden ways to do that. But that has always been the status quo. So your option, you can complain about this, and I get the frustration. I think we all feel this. But you can either continue shaking your fist in the air and being angry about this, or accept that you are a peasant. The system is designed to extract as much money from you as possible, whether that's your employer, whether that's the healthcare system, whether that's housing, whether that's banks. It doesn't matter. Those with the means to do so are going to extract as much money from you as possible. So your option is to take what you have and make the best life you can for yourself. And so you can be in the system, play the game, see if you can come ahead. It doesn't seem to be working for people. So I don't, like she talked about earlier, like retirees having to work in their 80s and like people dumping money into their 401k. Okay, we have baby boomers. I'm speaking from a millennial perspective, but you have boomers who are alive right now and you have Gen Xers who are alive right now. Millennials and Gen Z can read the room and we can look at how Gen Xers and how baby boomers are faring. If they're not doing too well, it might behoove us to stop playing the game that they've been playing. So if they played a game where you went to, get a job, work there for 30, 40 years, save for retirement, and then retire when you're 65, and then you still don't have enough, like maybe that game doesn't work, okay? I've been saying this for a while now. I think, Gen Z needs to drop out of college immediately. I think they need to find alternative pathways to different vocations and different, types of jobs than what millennials and Gen Xers pursued. But again, that's like another great example. Like if I were a 19 or 20-year-old right now, I would be reading the room. How has college worked out for millennials? Not good. Did we get the ROI we expected from our college degrees? No, she said in this video, 5% of people are actually working in a job that's related to their major. So you're taking on all this debt. You're not going to work in a job that's related to your field of study. And then wages aren't keeping up with the cost of, living. Why would you go to college? If you know all of those things, why would you continue going to college? So again, this is incumbent on people accepting what is, not what ought to be. The ought to be in this case is, well, we ought to all get an education. We ought to all go to school. Sure, that might be a nice thing to have. Again, I think that's, an illusion to get us all into debt. But, look at the people who are a generation or two ahead of you, see how they're faring. And then if they're not doing too well, maybe don't follow the same path that they did. That's my 2 cents.
And y'all are just going to keep jacking up the prices that we're never going to be able to afford to pay off. Because unfortunately, Dave Ramsey, the average American person has nothing left after their paychecks come in and they pay their bills and they buy groceries. They have nothing left to save. So you're sitting there with $20 to your name for 2 weeks until the next payday. And that's if you're lucky. There's some people that are in the red right now. They are working their asses off and they can't even pay all their bills on time. And they're trying to decide, do you want to keep the light on this month or the water? No, living is just a luxury. I can't afford to put braces on my kids right now. That's a luxury. Going out to eat, that's a luxury.
Yes, both those things are luxuries. Like I didn't have braces as a kid. Like that was, I needed them, but that was never going to happen. Going out is also a luxury. I can count on one hand the amount of times we have gone out this year. Usually it's been for a, birthday or celebration. I think 3 times that we've gone out in total. Okay. We've gotten takeout, maybe a dozen times, if that. Okay, these things are luxuries. Yes. Spotify is a luxury. Netflix is a luxury. Okay? Like, I get the frustration, but also you have to deflate your lifestyle. And I know this is hard for people to understand. I struggled with it in my 20s. But there's just a lot of things that we have that are luxuries. This book is a luxury, okay? This book, I think, costs like $60 on Amazon. Not a cheap book. I've marked it up. I could have borrowed this from the library, gotten it for free, but I love books, so I went ahead and bought it. It's a luxury, though, okay? Like, buying, nice cereal instead of... Okay, if you go to the grocery store and you have a choice between a giant thing of oatmeal or, Reese's Puffs, the luxury is the Reese's Puffs, okay? Like, I think we've inflated our lifestyles to the point that we don't know the difference between, like, surviving and actual luxuries. Like, if you can't afford things like oatmeal, eggs, milk, rice, beans, and cabbage, that's when the system actually is collapsing, okay? But if you're complaining because you can't afford to keep, getting $8 lattes anymore... Again, I love coffee. I understand. But at some point, like, you have to come to the conclusion for yourself that enough is enough and start treating things that you used to take for granted as luxuries. I don't get my nails done anymore, okay? There's a reason for that. It's a luxury. Like, I'm not spending that much money just to get my nails done. So you have to come to terms with that. And there are options to deflate your lifestyle, okay? Instead of buying new clothes, instead of buying new Lululemon leggings for $200, go to the thrift store. buy secondhand. There's a resale shop in town where you can buy Lululemon for, $20-$30 instead of $100+. Okay. And if you can't afford that, there's also, people who do clothing swaps and things like that. You can start a clothing swap, so you can actually get clothes for free. There's a buy nothing groups. It's like a whole thing. Minimal, like, go check out the minimalists and the buy nothing groups and the zero wasters. Like, they have all the tips on being hyper frugal. But you have options, okay? So you have to be willing to see what those options are, and then scale back your life. And then if you, like, at the bare minimum, you still can't afford the basic things, obviously then there's a real problem. But complaining because you can't get your kids braces, or because you can't go out to eat, I'm sorry, but it is a luxury. And like I said, we're in a period of time in our history that is going to be very turbulent, very disruptive, and the things that we took for granted, we're not going to have anymore. I mean, you just accept what is.
I don't know if this is happening to anybody else in America, but it's getting pretty fucking annoying with me. So I had a phone plan that I started about a year and a half ago. It was about $115 a month. A little overpriced for a single line, but sure. I was willing to pay it. Come a year and a half later, they're trying to charge me $167 a month for the rest of the contract. They don't specify why, they just, it's extra service fees. I'm sorry. $47 more in service fees a month I have to pay? That makes no. And then...
Okay, like, I don't know if maybe, like, millennials aren't aware of this, but you can, like, call and negotiate with folks like this. So if you have a cell phone plan, if you have your internet, your electric, your car insurance, whatever, like, you gotta call periodically and negotiate, because these people know that you're just gonna continue on, okay? And then they're gonna expect that. Like, I'll give you a great example. My car insurance renewed back in June. I was with Progressive. Progressive wanted to charge me like $750 for 6 months. So it's, over $100 per month. And then State Farm calls me like, oh, hey, we can give it to you for $60 a month. Okay, which is the better option? Like, you got to do the work. It sucks. Like, I'm not going to lie. I hate, having to deal with that every 6 months. But, if your internet provider, if your, car insurance, whatever, if they are like demanding more, like they're saying, oh, your plan's going up by this amount, and you're like, that's not cool. Like, find a better option and bring it back to them and be like, okay, match this or I'm out. Also, there's alternatives. Like, there's things like Mint Mobile. I see commercials for that all the time. There's all these like second tier, like pay-as-you-go plan options where you can pay like $40-$50 a month for your phone, and they use the same towers, so they're still using Verizon towers, they're still using AT&T towers. So like, yeah, it sucks to like adult and manage your like utilities and stuff, but sometimes you got to do it.
I literally go to my auto insurance, which was quoted to me when I first started the policy, which was a 6-month policy, at $311. $311. It's way overpriced, but I drive an Audi, so what the
Well,
I guess I'll pay the $300 a month.
Don't
for
drive an
insurance.
Audi. I've driven one.
Then
They're awful.
I go back to my policy, and they're telling me I owe $374 a month for the remaining 3 months. Extra accrued service fees. My storage unit.
Side note on this, that happened to me where I was paying one rate and then Geico jacked up the rate. So I didn't know this at the time, and I know now. If you enroll in their behavioral tracking thing, so I think Geico calls it Drive Easy, but they have all of them have these things. Like State Farm, they'll give you this little device to put into your, like a tracking device to put into your car. Geico did it through the app, but all of them have this thing where like they say it's a discount if you automatically enroll in it. So when they give you your quote, it's marketed to you as a discount, but what it is it's behavioral underwriting. So they are monitoring your they're monitoring how you drive your car in real time using a tracking system, and then they're evaluating your insurance on that. So that happened to me, and I enrolled in it through Geico, not knowing anything different. And I am, my fiance and I go out and do things all the time, and I routinely am the passenger in his vehicle, and he's the one driving. I didn't know it at the time, but Geico was recording every single time I was in a moving vehicle, regardless of whether or not I was the driver. So could have been with my fiance, could have been in an Uber, didn't matter. They jacked up my insurance based on his driving habits. So you need, like I said, you need to adult and be aware of what's like what you're enrolling in. Don't just, blindly accept what is. Like, ask questions. Like, when you're negotiating car insurance rates, like, ask questions like, hey, what is this? What does this entail? What does it mean? This, drive easy program, what does this mean if I have to download this app? They're not going to tell you. I ended up, calling and canceling with Geico because I was super annoyed by that. And apparently, like, you could go in and update every single ride, and like change whether you were the passenger or the driver. I didn't know that. No one disclosed that to me, right? But that was after the fact. So I'll probably never have insurance with them again because I don't, like being taken advantage of like that. But it's a great example. So he just assumes it's a fee or a service charge. It could be behavioral underwriting. This is happening to a lot of people. They're using big data and tracking you, and people aren't even aware of it. And that is one of the reasons why they're increasing prices, because they perceive you to be at greater risk.
It used to be $97 a month for my stuff. It is now $145. They raised the price on the contract and on the agreement that I made with the company. This is the same with the insurance company. This is the same with the phone plan company that I'm putting this video on. When are we gonna get sick and tired of corporate America taking our money? I'm getting real sick and tired of this. This isn't even like a political view on left or right side or anything like that. I'm sick of America stealing from its citizens. I'm sick of corporate billion-dollar...
Again, I get the frustration. They're not stealing if you're opting into it. If you're like, and again, health insurance, I get that. You don't really have very many options, right? But your phone, you have options. If you have a storage unit, why do you have a storage unit? That's my first question. I think those are a big ripoff, personally. You're, like I said, car insurance, if you're not doing your due diligence, like, that's kind of on you. So yeah, I get the frustration. There is greed. The elites are extracting greater and greater resources from us, but we are also opting into this. So part of this is on us, like stepping up and voting with our wallets and being like, no, you're not going to charge me this. I'm going to take my services elsewhere. And I don't think enough people are doing that.
Dollar conglomerate oligarchies that continue to throw little fees and fines on us like we owe it, like we have to force ourselves to pay because they contractually can keep us in a contract. It's getting old. How did my bills go up over $400 in the past month from accrued fees? They can't even specify why those fees were raised. We need to hold these people accountable. These CEOs, CFOs, these owners of these corporate businesses. $billion.
Okay. CEOs and CFOs are not the owners of corporations. They are the ones who have been put into place to manage those corporations. The owners are the shareholders. So if you want to go after, or if you want to express your anger and frustration, you have to go after the owners, so the shareholders, and those who have a substantial stake within those companies. And that's probably going to be State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock. And so you're going to have a lot of institutional investors. So again, you need to vote with your wallet. Okay, you need to, and this is something, I know it's not easy, but if you genuinely want change, if you're genuinely frustrated by the system, you need to stop letting BlackRock and companies like it, directly or indirectly, siphon your dollars away from you. You need to vote with your wallet. That's the only way things will change.
Wallets packed. All these rich, horrible people where it's like, well, they earned it fair and square. Yeah, by people over and ripping people off. Accrued fees, fines, and until their pockets are so lined, they don't even know what to do with their money. While the rest of us sit here and struggle and feed off of breadcrumbs on the ground, going, it's the government, it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans, it's everything else but exactly what corporate America is standing for right now. They don't give a about us citizens. They only give a about their company, and they just want to sit there money hungry, just shoveling their face full of our money.
So stop giving them money. I mean, that's the solution.
So I'm being evicted from my apartment. Yeah, let's talk about it. So I live in a part of Florida. I mean, Florida itself is disgusting, but I live in one of the worst parts of Florida. And there's nothing here. And for the past year, I have financially struggled to the point of mental insanity. I have been stealing my groceries. I have been basically stealing anything I can just so I can survive. I'm like a little squirrel. And the stress from the financial instability has made my bipolar symptoms come back up. Oh no. So now they want me to medication. I didn't need to take medication for 4 years, but now I need medication. So I'm getting in my car, I'm driving to my mom, and we're gonna live out of our cars, we're gonna camp, we're gonna save as much money as we can, we're gonna get vans. I'm done living in this system.
So I've been debating making another video on this topic, but I think people living in cars is kind of our version of the Hoovervilles of the 1930s. It's kind of a hidden reality of the cost of living. And I've done it. I lived in my car for a year and traveled while I did it. And you know, part of it was my choice, absolutely, but part of it also was just, yeah, it was economic realities. You know, access to housing is really, really hard to get especially if you're single. So again, I get the frustration, and you can be creative with it, and there are ways to lower your cost of living. It just requires a change of mind, and again, reframing what is versus what ought to be. There are lots of positive stories of people living in vans, living in RVs, who have drastically cut their cost of living and or downsized into smaller houses. So you know, if that's what the cards are for you, like just figure out how to use it best to your advantage. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's not great. But it's not necessarily a bad thing either. And there's lots of reasons why people choose to live in vehicles. And, you know, for me, I use it as an opportunity to travel around the country. And it was a great experience. I'm glad I had that option. So yeah, I think a lot of people are looking for alternatives. And this is one of the reasons why I think the crisis we're in isn't new or novel. I think it's something that has been kind of happening. I think there's been a festering in the economy for at least, you know, since 2008, if not, you know, a little bit before that. But, I started following the van life movement and the tiny house movement in the mid 2010s, and then, made it a reality during the COVID pandemic. But I think there's a reason why stuff like that has taken off, and I do think it is a reflection of the high cost of living. So yeah, I mean, get creative, but your ability to thrive despite the circumstances will come down to how you frame the experience. I would highly recommend reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I think that is a fantastic book about how to frame your mind and change your perspective even in the most dire of circumstances.
I will forage for my own food if I have to. I'll kill an animal if I have to. I'm done being part of this rat race. This society is not normal. This isn't normal.
It is normal.
Okay?
For all the reasons I've said.
So, I don't normally ever come on here and post anything except of my dog because he's absolutely gorgeous. But I am extremely frustrated being a full-time employed person living in Florida and not being able to afford to live. I have spent my whole day off trying to find a, more affordable place to live because I can't afford $1,300 a month in rent and then a $650 car note and then $300 in insurance and then you got utilities and it's either I eat or I pay my bills, and then even then it's like, okay, well, which bill is going to be late this month? And I'm so sick of it. Like all these apartment complexes and realtors and even private renters, so hard, and I mean that with everything in me. I know.
So, spoiler alert, all of the luxury apartment buildings that are being built in big cities across America aren't designed to be affordable. They are essentially tax write-offs for developers. Like, they create these buildings knowing full well people can't afford to live in them. And they use them to take tax write-offs. Okay. And then once the building is done, the debt associated with that building is then, sold off to another company, and then someone else is collecting the rent from it. So there's like all this like wheeling and dealing that's happening, and we're just completely oblivious to it. These luxury apartment buildings that are being built that's have $2,000 and $3,000 monthly rents, like they're just looking for dumb idiots who are willing to pay that much money to live in them. And I lived in one of those buildings, and let me tell you, it was not what it was cracked out to be. It was just, yeah, they talk about all these amenities and these great features and all this wonderful stuff, and it's none of that. You're just paying for like glorified dorm living and a building that has been built so shoddily that there's constant problems, there's constant repairs, you can hear the sound coming from all your neighbors. It's just not a high quality of life. So like I said, I know not everyone can move. I know there's a variety of circumstances, but I think too part of it is culture. At least this was my case. I had this idea that I had to live in one of those nice apartment complexes because that's would signal that I was doing okay, right? Like living in a poor person's apartment complex signals like you're not doing okay. There's problems, and there's middle grounds, right? Like there's really nice luxury apartments, there's really bad sketchy apartments, and then there's the ones in the middle that, okay, maybe they don't have all the amenities, maybe they're a few more miles from downtown, but hey, they're significantly cheaper. So again, like you just have to, I'm not saying like what she's looking for, but from what I gather, it sounds like she doesn't have a roommate. And so the fact that she's still like in the mindset of wanting to live on her own, knowing full well that the economy, like her job doesn't support that, tells me that she might be looking for apartments outside of her, what she can afford. And, it's how it is. And you have to find the ones that are within your budget, or move, or, get roommates, live with family. You have to get creative.
Nor anybody else should be working 60 plus hours a week and not be able to live. I'm about to crash the out. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me losing my mind. I don't know. But I'm about to lose my shit because I just can't take it.
I am so livid right now. Hear me out. Health insurance in America is a joke.
I just saw a video of a girl being like, how are we going to do this, like, for the rest of our lives? And I just have to say, low-key, I feel like a lot of young people right now in the workforce, I see comments all the time that are like, I'm betting on the world to end. It's like, yeah, me too. Like, how up of a economy, of a society, of a country are we living in right now that your young people, your new to the workforce young people, are basically like, we basically have like ideations because we don't want to do this forever. There's no reward for our work anymore.
This is so nihilistic, and we really have to nip this in the bud, because it doesn't have to be like this. Again, I understand the frustration, right? I get it. But you can either see the glass as half empty or half full, and it's your choice which one you see it as. And I get that young people are kind of feeling hopeless and they don't see a reason to live anymore. But I'll frame it like this for you, and you can take it or leave it. But the way I look at it is, my ancestors up until this point in time, obviously you can go back to the Ice Age and all that kind of stuff, but more recently, right? My lineage comes mostly from Germany and Great Britain, right? So all through Europe, right, survived wars. We survived the Black Death. Like, I'm here today because my ancestors survived the Black Death, survived wars. They survived bad harvests. They came to the Americas in, the 17th century. So they left their homeland and they came to this new place, and they worked the land and hoped for a better life. They fought in the revolution, so survived that. Survive all sorts of economic turbulence that has happened since then. So who am I to say, okay, we're done, I'm going to end it. Like, I'm not going to have kids, or I'm just going to, say bye. Who am I to make that decision? There are generations, you know. I think I've done a genealogy. I think there's like 15, or I think I'm the 15th or 16th, I forget which one, 15 or 16 generations of my ancestors who, I'm a 15, 16 generation American. So my ancestors came here, did, you know, helped build this country and did all that stuff. So who am I to bring that to an end? So you have to really zoom out and think of it like everyone who is alive today is the evidence of resiliency, the evidence of adaptability, the evidence of flexibility. So I think it's incumbent of us to honor that and recognize like, wow, our, you know, ancestors had it a lot harder than we did. And they were able to make it so that you and I could have lives in the lives we live today. And, you know, if you want to put an end to your family tree, then that's your choice. But I would encourage young people to, you know, expand your time horizon and look beyond yourself and your immediate needs and look at the entirety of life that has preceded you. And if that's something you actually want to bring an end to.
What's the reward? Like, oh, you get to go to sleep at night.
I feel like the lack of money that people have now is really just starting to compound anxiety, depression, anger. They're short fuse. People are just getting, it's even worse to me this year than it was last year, but fuses are getting shorter. You see people that any kind of issue comes up, whether they're in a store, just anywhere, people are just automatically, they're getting the shakes, they're getting angrier faster. People are not having the amount of patience they used to have. It really comes down to emotional intelligence, and people are not able to manage this anymore. And I'm starting to see people break. I see people constantly all day, and it just seems like it's starting to just kind of compound. And I don't know where this is going to go. Bills are not getting cheaper. Nobody's getting paid more money. Matter of fact, companies out there are quietly reducing things like perks, benefits, bonuses.
It's going to get worse before it gets better. So in a way,
you're actually making less money probably than you might have made in the last several years. And at the same time, everything just continues to go up. Aggregate numbers, I bet everything put together, you're probably almost double your expenses that you were before COVID. If you add up every single bill you have. I just don't know where this goes. People just don't, people are not making eye contact with you out in public. Less and less people are smiling. People just seem on edge. They seem agitated. They're just in their own world. And it's like everybody's got their brain on a hyperactive thing, about stress, about money. And man, the lack of money is just going to break people. Money doesn't buy happiness, but money buys your peace. It buys options. It buys your ability to survive and to enjoy the things around you. And if you ain't got no money, well, everything else around you crumbles. And man, I don't know, man. But people are just getting less and less pleasant to be around, and they're just getting more agitated.
I'm telling you right now, if we have not lived frugally for years, if we haven't been making certain financial decisions like we have been, we would be in a lot of trouble right now because things are just really hard in the economy. My husband has been a proponent of staying debt-free, of living well below your means for many years. And it was so hard for me to get on board with that in the beginning. And I'm just so glad that I did, because I don't know right now how we'd be making it. It's so hard. It's really hard. And things that we continue to do to live a very frugal life is we cut back on eating out. We cut back on our food costs. So if we can't afford certain luxury items, we just don't get them anymore. And sometimes we do want to splurge.
So a good example of a luxury item, just like put this into like normal context for people, because I don't think you understand, like every single purchase you make is a choice. So yeah, like groceries in aggregate have gotten expensive, but there are certain luxuries and things that that you can cut back on. So a great example. I used to love going to Trader Joe's. I'd go there all the time. But Trader Joe's is really designed for single people. Okay, they have a bunch of like grab and go things, freezer things, a lot of food that, delicious, wonderful. Not necessarily the most budget friendly. Okay. So like they have a fantastic cheese selection. They have great crackers. I used to love going, getting stuff like that. I would consider going and getting cheese to eat with crackers a luxury. Okay. Like as much as I would love it, some of their smoked Gouda, it's a luxury. That the chocolate selection they have, it's a luxury. Like we love eating ice cream. Getting Ben and Jerry's is a luxury. We got a Ninja Creamy, and like I said, I make things from scratch. So now instead of buying ice cream, it's something I make. We've invested in all sorts of different kitchen appliances, but we have a pizza oven. Pizza has gotten really expensive. I think I've seen some people get like takeout pizza for like $50. It's wild. I make my own dough, keep a bunch of it frozen, make my own sauce, and then if we want pizza, we just turn on the pizza oven and we get it. Yeah, there's an upfront cost with getting some of those appliances. Totally get that. But that's a great example of like little things you can do. So like go to a different store. Like I don't go to Trader Joe's because I know I'm going to impulse buy, and the things I'm going to impulse buy I don't need, and they don't really add value. And then obviously we over time I've invested in a couple different kitchen appliances that elevate our quality of life at home. And they've, they were expensive to get up front, right? But they're far cheaper over time, over the long term, than constantly going out for food, constantly getting takeout and that kind of thing. So these are the types of like micro transactions and micro decisions I think everyone has to make. And then rather than being like Chicken Little, like, oh my gosh, the world is ending, and oh my gosh, I can't afford groceries, like actually itemize it, go through it, figure out where are you actually spending your money, and then figure out different like things you can do. If you're buying pints of Ben and Jerry's every single time you go to the grocery store, like that's a luxury. Like you will survive without Ben and Jerry's. And if you don't think you will, like find a way to make your own ice cream at home. Like it's an option.
Splurge a little bit if we have a little bit of extra money, but otherwise we really try to just cook from scratch. Don't buy brand name things. I mean, we really try and just stick on a budget. Things that I've done before is actually just take out money from the bank and put money in little envelopes, and I'll budget to say, okay, this is the food budget for the month, this is the entertainment budget for the month, so on and so forth. But just cutting back on food. We also really cut back on any type of subscriptions, which everything is like a subscription service now, almost everything. But really cutting back on those because it adds up. $10 here, $15 here, $5 there, $50 here and there. Sometimes you'll download apps on your phone and they'll have a subscription service and it'll just renew and you forgot to cancel it. Things like that. I mean, really just watching out for that. For entertainment, we try and do as many free things as possible. So we love going on walks. That's free. We love seeing what type of events the city might be putting on. Just anything like that. Anything that's low cost. If we're going to the movie theater, we're going when we can pay the cheaper prices. We're not going like on a Friday or Saturday night. All those little things add up, and those are things that we've been doing for a long time. And then when we need things, we really look for used items. We'll go on Facebook Marketplace, we'll look on Craigslist, we'll go to thrift stores, even though thrift stores are getting more expensive now too, right? But these are the types of things that we do just to lower the cost of everything. If we have extra items or something that we don't need anymore, we'll sell it and try and make some extra cash. And that's always a good thing to do as well. If you need some extra money, if there's anything that you can sell right now that you don't need, that isn't that valuable to you, go ahead and sell it.
I totally agree with this. I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, eBay put out a report and they said like the average household has like $3,000 or like $3,500 worth of stuff that's just hanging out. I know during COVID, before I was living in my car and traveling, I was at my parents' house. And so to be, helpful, I was decluttering their basement and I helped them sell some stuff. And just literally, there were a couple high ticket items that sold on eBay, but for the most part, I sold a bunch of stuff on Facebook Marketplace, did a porch pickup where I just left it on the porch. The person came, left money in a container, and I sold like $10,000 worth of junk. And I'm literally saying junk. It was, just random stuff. But people have a ton of stuff in their homes. Like we are hoarders and we don't even realize it. So if you are truly in dire straits right now, like you have things, you have options, you have things, you can sell stuff. When I started selling on eBay in 2003, There wasn't, a Facebook marketplace. There weren't all these options. Now, like, you can have people come to your front door and leave you money in exchange for like giving them an item. It's crazy to me. You don't even have to ship stuff if you don't know how to ship things. It's gone so easy. So yeah, like if you have stuff you need to get rid of, or you have stuff that you could get rid of, sell it. Like use that, take that cash and pay down a debt, and do what you need to do.
That's something that everybody can be doing, and usually you can make some extra cash like that. And then also we pay really close attention to our finances. It's important to track all the dollars that are coming in and coming out of your account, because that's when you're really going to see if there are some extra things that you can cut out. Because at this point, I think it's really important for everybody to try and live as frugally as possible, and that's just our mindset. Other people think that they shouldn't have to live like that, but that's been our mindset, and it's done well for us for many years. And again, I'm grateful to my husband, because I was a super spender back in the day. I mean, I would get a paycheck from work, and then the paycheck was gone. I was spending it after bills were done. I did not have the mindset of trying to save anything. I wanted to get clothes. I wanted to take the vacations and just spend all the money. I might save a little bit, but then it was saving it to spend on the next big thing that I wanted to get. And that was really, a challenge for me. But if I could do it, then anyone that's...
Okay. So, like I said in the beginning, I think we're in a period of time where folks need to accept what is, not what ought to be, not what they think that should be, not what they think they deserve or are entitled to. Like, the game has changed. If you think you need to save for retirement, if you think you need to have a 6-figure salary, if you think you need to live in a luxury apartment, okay, that's your choice. But I think for the vast majority of people, you need to change your goal and you need to rebaseline, and the goal is just to survive. Okay. The goal is to get through the next few years, get through this transition period, so that on the other side you have options. And one of the things I'm really harping on, and in some of the content I've made and some of the writing I've done, is giving yourself flexibility. There was one of the guys in one of these videos referenced it, but the more flexibility you have, the more options you will have, and the more adaptive you will be. So I'm working on writing a book right now. It's temporarily titled The Next 18 Months. But it's basically what people need to start doing over the course of the next 18 months to begin preparing for when I think AI is really going to start hitting people hard. I think in 2027, sometime around there, we're really going to start feeling the effects of AI. So, one of the chapters in the book is called Bolster Your Finances, and it's all about what you can do to like get your finances under control. And like you can do some of the stuff she described, like, cut your subscriptions and, curb your spending and do the frugal stuff. And that you'll see all that stuff on the finance blogs, but you need to get past that. It's not just because there's only so much you can cut, right? So there's only so much you can cut out of your budget, and so you can only live so frugally until you go crazy. And I totally get that. So this is more of a pragmatic approach. And so I have 3 recommendations. One is to diversify your streams of income. You can't rely on a W-2 income anymore. And again, throughout history, this has been the case. During a hard times, farmers would become craftsmen. They would have something they could do on the side. So, in a medieval household, the man would go and work the fields, but then the woman, if she had a skill, with embroidery or sewing or something, she would sell her skills on the side and help bring in money for the family. So you need to diversify your streams of income. There's lots of ways to do this, but you need to get off or mitigate the risk that you currently have by relying only on a W-2 income. The next thing is to save for an emergency fund. Like, most people don't have this, but the more cash you can get on hand in a bank account in the next, 18 months, the better off you'll be. The recommendation is 3 to 6 months worth of your living expenses. So if you spend $10,000 a month, you're going to need $30,000 to $60,000. If you spend $5,000 a month, you will need half that. So that's why deflating your lifestyle is important, because when you have a lower cost of living, you need to have less cash on hand to maintain that cost of living. If you have a high cost of living, you need to have more money on hand to be able to maintain that lifestyle. And then if you can't maintain that lifestyle, that's when you're going to really feel some of the social and mental consequences of that. So if you don't have an emergency fund, you need to start saving for an emergency fund. And then, the biggest thing is to restructure your debt. Like I said, debt is by design. A lot of us spend money on credit, or we have, car loans and mortgages and student loans. And some things you can restructure, some things you can't. But you need to look at your own personal finances and figure out how to get lower your interest rates and get it more manageable, right? The Dave Ramsey of the world, they're going to tell you to pay off your debt, become debt free. Okay. There was a time and place for that. I think, the 2010s, maybe that was a little bit easier than it is right now. Don't necessarily pressure, if you want to, fine, but like, don't pressure yourself just to pay off debt. Get your debt to a place where you can manage it, okay? Where you can manage it. You're not going to like hurt your credit score. You're not going to impact your future, because credit scores are important. They give you access to housing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You need to have a good credit score or you will get locked out of housing. But restructure your debt, and make it so it's manageable. And so these are some of the things I recommend, but this is a whole chapter I wrote on this. If you want to read the whole book, I wrote a little blurb about it here, but I let me see if I think I put it. I don't know if I did or didn't. Oh yeah, no, sorry, hold on. It's in this one. Okay, pause that. I have the chapters here. So if you wanted to read some of the chapters, I'll leave a link in the description of the chapters I've written. It's all gonna be on Substack, and then the ebook, it'll be ebook first, and that'll be available next month. So if that's something you're interested in, the book kind of takes what's happening, breaks it down into context so you understand why people are losing jobs, why the economy is so bad, why things seem hopeless, who is going to have, be at more risk of feeling, hopeless, and like there's not much to work for, and then what you can actually do about it. So some of the tips these people have given are good, living frugal, but I think we need to, like I said, you need to plan for a future that is unlike any future any of us have ever lived through before. I'm talking Great Depression level stuff. So you need to plan for something like that and give yourself flexibility. And I think the next 18-ish months is this Goldilocks window that we have open right now, where you can, sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace and put cash in the bank. You can freelance a skill and, generate income that way. You can learn another skill or start trade school or something like that, and then capitalize on that later on. So I'll leave links to this in the description, but yeah, I think people have options, and I get the frustration. I'm right there with you. It's a struggle, but we have to change the narrative. We have to start thinking of what the pathway is forward, not keep doom scrolling and getting sucked into the all the mire of this, because I think there are options, and if we're just so focused on the limitations, we're not going to see the options that present themselves when they do. So if you like this analysis, I would love it if you would follow and subscribe, and feel free to leave your comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.